Hey everyone, it's Kai.
And Lafayette, and this is
The Theory of Living. Thanks for tuning in. We're able to bring you this episode thanks to our Patreon members.
Patreon is a subscription-based platform where people can provide support for content creators like us.
Thanks to our Patreon members and supporters, we're able to provide free content on the podcast and weekly episodes.
By being a Patreon member, you'll have access to our entire podcast library, full video and audio episodes, along with much more.
If you like this episode and you feel it adds value to your life,
or you hate it,
please subscribe on Patreon and or leave your review on Apple Podcast.
And don't forget to mention it to your friends over your next beer. Truly, thank you again, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Yeah, and again, we don't even know if death actually exists. We know it exists in a rough form of an idea, like we're no longer able to perceive those individuals in the way we perceived them before.
Yeah.
So somebody famously like Socrates who, was sentenced to death and then chose to drink hemlock as part of his punishment, mockingly said, not mockingly, but to the people around him, he said, "To fear death, gentlemen, is no other than to think of oneself wise when one is not, to think one knows what one does not know."
Yeah.
I think that's spot on. We cannot know what occurs after death. So to put a value judgment on it seems almost like a moot point. To call it good or bad, you're basically claiming to know something you absolutely cannot know.
Right.
110%. But we do this constantly and consistently. And I don't think it's inhuman to put values on death. I would say it's extremely human to put a value system on death because it's a change. It's when things change.
Yeah.
And we're very uncomfortable with large, drastic changes most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
More subtle, nuanced changed things we don't realize that are occurring. Even functions happening right now in your body. There's change occurring. You're aging. You're okay with these conceptually because they're so small. But when somebody dies, specifically when you have a relationship with somebody and they die, that's when you have a huge impact on your value system of it either being extremely good or extremely bad. But when somebody dies that you don't know, for the most part, most people, I think, have a detached view of it. They might say that's sad because they know in their value system death is sad or negative, whatever. So they'll just say it's bad. But they don't communicate in any meaningful way that actually shows they care. They're almost just virtue signaling to remind other people, yes, death is a bad thing. And again, it's something none of us will escape, ever.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fallacy of most value systems when surrounded with death.
Right.
And that's why I think Socrates, what he did was, elegant in that way, even though it was suicide.
Right. And, that's based on our inability to perceive anything after death, right?
Yeah.
But also, I think for the most part, for a lot of people, I think their fear is largely due to the notion that life is worth living. Life is great, life is precious. They know. I think most people would agree, other than some minor cases where people are very desperate, trying to commit suicide, things like that, right? But for most people I think they would agree that life is precious, or at least they value life itself, right? I want to have a good life. Life is precious, right? I think the fear of death largely comes from that.
True.
Because the life ends, right? The thing that you consider as precious no longer exists anymore, right?
But they've never experienced the opposite of that situation.
Sure.
So they're only operating from the place of a known. And when you only have a known, you can only operate in one way. Right. So we just don't have anything to compare it to. So to me, it's no surprise that most people are going to be life affirming. How could you not be? That's all you've ever known, except again for these outliers. And again, people that have suicidal ideation or tendencies. I think most of those come from a place of having great difficulties and tragedies in their life, or mental illness and other things. But there are I imagine a vast minority of people that have it all put together and have arrived to the conclusion that suicide is the best option for them.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, that's potentially true for some people.
Yeah.
But whoever's listening to this, that's an extreme minority.
Mm-hmm.
If you're suffering from ideation and those types of things, it probably does not apply to you unless you've gone through every process to get help and things like that. And look, I'm even basically continuing to idolize a value system that I don't know the opposite of. You know, I'm still being life affirming even right now to remind people. But I'm not doing it because I think death is a bad thing. I'm doing it because I think life is so powerful and a great thing. And the experiences are so worth having that I would encourage anybody that's going through anything to try and better themselves. Or, you know, that's a poor word choice, poor term, but try to find the joy and value in life so they can get more out of it. And again, same with the value system. That's the other thing, you know, creating a value system so you can have a greater depth of living. I mean, that's what we do here with theory of living.
100%. I mean, I think, you know, it really comes back to the point that what matters is what we can experience and what we have control of, right? I mean, those are the most important things that we need to really focus on, right? Because when I even said that, you know, that fear of death largely comes from the notion that life is precious. I mean, you can argue that then, oh, well, can I just intentionally make my life worse, just bad and full of evil, so that my death's gonna be, I won't have that fear? I mean, yeah, maybe. And I think that's probably the case for some people, I mean, you know, who are suicidal severely, right? That their life is just not meaningful to them anymore.
Yeah.
That to them, death is the only solution, right? Yeah. So in that sense, at least it's logically consistent. But I'm not saying that that's what one should do.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not saying that. But just because we understand the fear of death comes from that notion, is it even possible conceptually that we do the opposite so that we can succeed at eliminating the fear? I mean, is it possible?
I mean, personally, I think that the expression of these negative values or positive values in this way is mostly people refusing to accept that death is an absolute. I think people do this in the opposite way, where they live very passively, adapt the normal 9 to 5, you know, the normal cultural, historical context of what happiness should look like and should be for their time period, and live out that life. And to me, that would be a philosophical death.
Yeah,
you're dead in that situation because you essentially are just reactionary. You're living everything everybody's told you. Yeah. Same with the other people that take the opposite rebellious approach. If they're only doing that to rebel against the norm rather than they've chose their value system, you know, it's just the other side of the same coin to me personally. So I think you can express it both ways, while also I think you can have life affirming and create your own value system, and that can be expressed both ways too. I mean, there's people that have done horrendous things, serial killers, that absolutely have no fear of death because they're living their life in a meaningful way to them. Granted, I would say these are extreme outliers, again, conditioned by society, civilization, and different things, so they can express themselves in that way.
Yeah, but even so, that could be a very relative term when they say that when they claim that, oh, I don't have any fear of death. Yeah, that could be a very relative term. Yeah, right.
But I would argue there's probably a bit of truth there, because even people that do amazing, wonderful things, a lot of those individuals don't have a fear of death. You know, so they're unrestrained in that regard. They can actually express themselves to the full degree. And yes, obviously, the serial killer, the sociopath, the psychopath, whatever they are, they're the extreme antithesis of life affirmation, right? Where the guy that's going in discovery and creating things, he's the extreme positive of life affirmation, right? Still the same coin, just vastly different expressions. But to me, still, both those people are more groundbreaking than somebody who's just doing what they've been told or have never challenged or thought about that. I would still give more reverence in regard to those individuals, even the ones that have done like crazy things, because it takes a lot to do crazy things. Yeah. Not that I would personally, because that's, again, not with my value system. I would say most people that have fallen to the antithesis of the value system probably arrived there from a very difficult life. But even what we were watching the other day, you can find out explanations of why people ended up where they are. And you start to realize, oh shit, they're like where they're coming from. I'm not very far. I can totally understand how they arrived to the conclusions they have about life and why they do what they do and why they've done it. And you feel real empathy for those people, even people that have done horrendous things.
We're talking about the anime?
But just in general, I mean, you see this thing displayed throughout time numerously.
Yeah.
Which I think also helps, though, allow our values and our ego to be more accepting of other people. When you realize that you were one misstep or just thinking things slightly differently, and you could have been that person. You literally could have been that person.
Yeah. I think, that ability for us of ours to be empathetic, for those who don't seem like having making good decisions or more accepted decisions, or I think come from our understanding that nothing's really absolute, right?
Yeah.
That's why we're not told to be empathetic, but we're just naturally empathetic, right? I think it's good and bad, I guess, in my opinion, right? Because we can be empathetic. That's a great thing. But at the same time, we do that because we still don't have that, better understanding of what really that means,
Yeah. I mean, I almost feel like, though, we're naturally inclined to, again, empathize with people because we understand that things do change. It's like a fundamental thing ascribed in the universe as far as we're aware. Everything absolutely changes all the time. You just need the right type of equipment to measure the change. So I think that's why we're so ready to adapt new ideas. We're ready to adopt new things because we understand fundamentally, of course there's new ideas and of course there's some merit just because things change.
Right.
When you try to say things never change, that's when you run into like strong ideologies, people that can do, potentially horrendous acts and things like that because they're set in their ways and their ego is bound to the idea that these are permanent. These are set in stone. These are like fundamental qualities of the universe. And when those become values and ethical systems, then it becomes very easy to say, I'm right, and I'm going to exert punishment on those that do wrong based on my value system. But you have to, again, deny the fundamental quality of the universe that change is real. Things are not absolute.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the conundrum we run into with that. But speaking on the terms of death, have you had any, you and I, both lost our friend Steven, who's like a brother to us in a lot of ways. So we've experienced death very personally, hands-on.
Right.
And then I lost my mom.
Externally, right?
Yeah, externally, right? We had the experience of death.
Yeah.
Then I lost my mom, over 10 years ago. And there's been the continual process of learning and adapting and changing with the realization that those people are no longer in your life. So you experience death even through that. Like, again, I'm not experiencing death. I'm experiencing the concept of death. And then I'm applying its judgments and values against me. And how should it affect me? So I think how we view death has a huge impact on how we live our lives. Because if it's something we think that we really
100%.
should fear and be afraid of, most people would say that, yet they do nothing to live their lives any differently. While it seems the people that say death is nothing to be afraid of somehow find the courage to live an authentic life. That's been my anecdotal experience, and just from the things I've read, the people I've known, and the media I've consumed, that seems to be something that rings true more times than not.
Yeah. Again, it's kind of cliche to say this, but, really most important thing is to focus on what we have control of, right? What matters to us. No one wants to die, at least, no one wants to die with full of regrets,
Yeah.
You know, full of regrets that, oh, I should have done this. I should have, said this. Nobody wants to live like that, right? Even those who are suicidal, let's say that they make, intentionally bad choices. Yeah, they may die with, the fact that they have done everything they wanted to, but at the same time, they die, with that possibility that they could have done differently, right? They could have done differently in that life. They could have made their lives better and worth living.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, at least you're going to die with that regrets.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. I think a lot of people, though, that have a fear of death or think about death are living in a state of regret because they're not taking action in their day-to-day moments to be living the life they want, which leaves room to think about death.
Yeah.
Because in some way, you're committing an intellectual death by not living the life you believe you should be living.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you're very aware of death as a concept, but you seem to forget that it's literally happening to you right now. You're thinking about it 20 years, 30 years, 10 years down the road. You're thinking about that death when really you're experiencing it right now by choosing not to change your life and engage in what's meaningful to you.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, create something meaningful to you. To me, that's the real death. It's like the Ernest Hemingway quote.
Yeah.
He says, a cowardly man dies 1,000 deaths, or dies the death of 1,000 paper cuts, but the brave only die once.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Which is beautiful, because I really do believe that's incredibly true. When you compromise your value system, and I mean compromise in the sense of disregard, blatant disregard, total inaction, total antithesis of your value system, and behave accordingly in that way, that's when you really experience death.
Yeah.
I think that's death.
Yeah.
And I think that should be feared far greater than the cessation of life.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel about death.
Right.
I mean, that's why we're doing this too. I mean, you and I both can agree on those terms to a certain level, maybe not 100%, but well enough that we take action in our lives.
Right.
And that's what I would want any of this message to do for somebody out there listening. I'd propel you into action. I don't know, man. I don't really have a fear of death when I'm living my life the way I feel like I should be living it. I really don't. It doesn't.
Right.
Even when it crosses my mind momentarily, I think about it. I'm like, I'd be fine dying right now. I'm doing what I'm passionate about. I'm choosing to express my will upon the world. And dying doing that? Hell yeah. What a great death. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, very similar to me too, that first of all, I do not have, at least in a meaningful way, I don't have fear of death because I don't really correlate what happens in life with what happens after death. I just really don't correlate them. I don't think they're not consequential. Well, obviously, it's not a religious view. I mean, completely opposite to religious view because they are correlated, right?
Yeah.
Whether you say consequence, what happens after death is consequence of what you do in life, right? I mean, that's most religious views, including Egyptians too, right? The death, their value is determined by their virtue in life, basically, and that's why the mummification, and then that determines like how luxurious the mummification becomes and all that, right? But
isn't it funny too, though, because the soul and the idea of this immortal thing, isn't that just to skirt the realization that death exists?
Yeah.
Like it's something so conceptually hard to grasp. We come up with the idea of the soul or some form of immortality.
Yeah.
Just to bypass this process that's, in my opinion, completely meaningless. And I say that as somebody who's gone through tragic loss. I'm not saying loss is meaningless, but I'm saying the death of the individual is mostly meaningless. Because you get the experience of them through the time you spent with them, which then has a direct impact as long as you're willing to be conscious and think about it in your everyday life. And like they continue to live on that way.
Yes.
Like the impact is not lost. It echoes through time.
Yeah, so their existence is in different form now, right? They no longer exist physically, but they do exist in your mind.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm saying if you're struggling with somebody's death,
Mm-hmm.
to me at least, that's what you can do. You can carry their flag in your life.
Yeah.
And that can be a much
True.
more powerful experience than,
Mm-hmm.
don't get me wrong, you're going to cry, you're going to weep, you're going to have a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you stay in that forever, you've basically died with them.
Yeah.
What a horrible thing. They would never want that for you.
Yeah.
You know, you definitely don't want that for yourself.
Right.
You know? So you got to see the good in almost every situation when it's applicable and when you can.
Mm-hmm.
And continue to be life affirming and not die in those small moments, even when
Mhm.
you're experiencing death.
Yeah.
Death of a loved one, death of a friend, death of a concept. Like, be willing to let go of these things, even
Yeah.
conceptually, because they can add such value to your life when you're willing to adopt and adapt new ideas
Mm-hmm.
or people, friends,
Yeah.
family,
Yeah. I mean,
pets.
definitely really contemplating these ideas of death and life can be life altering, man. I think I really recommend everyone to do the same. You know, think about it, because that's going to really force you to look at your life, right?
Yeah.
In that sense, I think it really meaningful and productive, because you can guide yourself in your life in a better way, right? Than just, again, we've talked about this many times, but just to live your life in a imposed way, right? I mean, you don't
Yeah.
want to live it like that, right?
Yeah.
And one should have his or her very core value system. It may change, it can be adjusted, but you should always strive for establishing those concrete value system for yourself. Otherwise, you may not, you could be shakeable in hardships and in bad situations, right? I mean,
Completely.
that's the correct way to, maybe I shouldn't say correct way, but that's a way to live your life.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it goes back to the concept that Lee wanted us to mention. Memento Mori.
Mm-hmm.
Remember your death. It's just what it means. Translates to.
Right.
Just be aware you're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
It's also why we have such huge imagery, skulls, the Grim Reaper, things like this.
Yeah.
These are supposed to be memento moris.
Yeah.
Reminders that you inevitably will die one day. And again, it's to remind you so you can live life right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the purpose. Not to scare you, not to make you fearful.
Right.
Not fearful in a way that like paralyzes you. Maybe fearful in the way that reminds you time is ticking. The moments are short.
Right.
I must live for now.
Yeah.
It's like the Dead Poets Society, right?
Right. Yeah.
Carpe diem.
Right.
Seize the day. Seize it right now. That's all you have.
Yeah.
Everything else, it's an illusion. The future's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
That's custom. We only think the future is going to occur tomorrow because we experienced it yesterday.
Yeah.
We experienced today, knowing yesterday that tomorrow might come.
Yeah.
We're not guaranteed it, but we so quickly adapt and accept a fundamental aspect of reality is that tomorrow is guaranteed.
Yeah.
Like the future actually exists,
Right.
but it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't. It's just a concept. So be reminded the only thing you have really is right now.
Yeah.
This very moment, the moment you're listening to this.
Yeah. Sure. Already 51 minutes in. So I think, is there anything more you want to talk about?
Nothing particularly. I mean,
Yeah.
we're starting a 3-day fast today, so
Yeah. I mean, so far so good. It's not that bad. The first day is the easiest one, honestly. Are you hungry?
no. I
Okay.
mean, we don't eat at this time anyway. We don't eat till way later, so.
Right. But yeah, again, life is full of experiences that you choose to have, right? So, go out there, get some good experiences, and live your life autonomously, right?
Yeah.
That's another thing.
And here's the cool thing. If you're worried about the future,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you act in every moment
Mm-hmm.
to the value system you've decided upon that's valuable, the next moment's going to reveal itself, and you'll be more capable in it.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry that much.
Mm-hmm.
Just start living it out, and things fall into place.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. 100%.
All right, guys.
I think that's it for today.
Take care. We'll talk to you later.
Bye. That's this week's short version of the episode of the Theory of Living podcast. Thank you for listening with us. We're Lafayette and Kyle. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode.
And if you'd like to help support us, we have a Patreon page where you can subscribe for exclusive content, early access, and full versions of the podcast.
Also, please share it with others who you think may find value in our discussion.
Leave a rating, a review, and please subscribe.
Thank you again.
See you next time.